I'm very proud and happy to welcome up Emma Storbacka, CEO of Avaus. Stage is yours.
Give me your attention, baby. I gotta tell you a little something about yourself.
What about now? All right, perfect. So 52% of the Fortune 500 companies of 15 years ago don't exist anymore. And out of all of the data in the world, 90% was created in the last 3 years. So for all of you three-headed monsters out here, are you preparing for that reality? That's the topic that I'm going to talk to you about today. My name is Emma Storbacka. I'm the CEO of a company called Avaus. We are a consultancy of about 150 people, 60 here in Stockholm. And we're really obsessing about making sure that Nordic and European companies aren't on that list of companies that are no longer. And we do that by making sure that we help companies future-proof capabilities for the age of artificial intelligence. So making sure we have customer experience, marketing, service capabilities that customers today expect and value. And the combination of kind of understanding customers and designing good experiences together with tech and data is really the key to this. But I would like to argue that we are not targeting a high enough, a future-proofed enough level. So we and I have the big pleasure of working with a lot of good big companies around the Nordics and kind of being on the journey towards future-proofing. But unfortunately, I think we see way too much of kind of future-proofing, but for 2 years from now. So typically when we come into an engagement, we talk about more efficient targeting or more efficient personalization or just simply making sure that your customer experience looks the same in all channels. That's a very basic problem. And what might happen if you don't kind of set your bar high enough is exactly that of the 52% on the Fortune 500 list. You become irrelevant. Because the companies you're competing with aren't your next door neighbor. It's the Amazons and the Facebooks and the Googles of the world that will come in and disrupt retail. They will disrupt insurance. They will disrupt telco. They will disrupt basically every single industry there is here in our Nordic market. So kind of what I want to kind of argue for is that we have to make sure that we're taking aim at a target way higher than only kind of a targeted or personalized customer experience. So we call it algorithmic experiences. And I really want to kind of give a big shout out to the three-headed monsters who actually dare to take the vision all the way up to the age of artificial experiences and algorithmic experiences, and one of those is actually Anne Gro from Telia, who you will hear from later on. So very excited to hear about that. And when you're kind of taking the leap towards your future-proofed capabilities, it's really not only about the technical stuff. It's a lot about the technical stuff, because typically for those three-headed monster CMOs out there, the tech and data and IT side is the most difficult one. So not only do you have to think about the customer experience, you have to understand a lot about data and tech. And once you're there, you also have to drive change and transformation in the way that we're working with marketing. And also kind of feel comfortable with carrying the weight of a pretty big strategic investment in data and tech. So also being able to show the business results. So what are then these algorithmic experiences and what do they look like? I wanted to start out by showing something that happened to me when I was in the lovely city of Malmö a couple of months ago. So I'd never been to Malmö, and I was there looking for a place where I could drink a cup of coffee. And when opening up Google Maps, Google Maps was able to tell me that, this place, Noir Kaffekultur, seems to be a 70% match for me. Having never been in Malmö, this was a fantastic experience. It was a real wow moment. So by me sharing my data with Google, Google knowing how I behave in Stockholm, Google was able to provide me with a relevant recommendation and even kind of indicate how sure they are about this recommendation. So this, I think, is an excellent example of a personalized experience, which is algorithmically driven. So this is not a UX solution. This is data which I have been giving away for years, delivered back to me and creating value. Another good example is Netflix, the classic recommendation engine example. But if you think about recommendation engines and what they do for you, it's also a kind of glue for your customer experience. And what's, for example, happening in grocery retail at the moment is a lot of investment in making sure that all of those data points that you have been giving away for years actually start providing value back to you. So if you think about, for example, if your grocery retailer knows what you're most likely to buy today, for example, your e-commerce experience will become a lot easier. You might have a pre-populated basket online. And do you then actually want to stop by the competing brand when you're on your way from work? No, because it's gonna mess up your algorithm. Your life is gonna be harder if you're not sticking with your brand. The same way you wouldn't lend out your Netflix to a friend because they're gonna mess up your algorithm. Spotify being another excellent example. So also kind of thinking about how do we take all of the data to surprise and delight and make our customers appreciate us as a source of inspiration or serendipity. The anti-Netflix recommendation engine talk is really about, are they putting us in a bubble? Am I watching everything, the same stuff that everyone else is doing? And I think YouTube is doing the exact opposite. So it's very good at kind of bringing what you're very likely to like, but they're also bringing a lot of random stuff. So you might find something new in the process. It could be that these algorithmic experiences are helping you with decision support. So knowing what we know about you, will you actually like what you're buying? Is this actually something we can recommend that you buy? And this, of course, brings up the question of ethics. So quite often, if we start looking at the data, we're able to say if this is going to be a good purchase or not. Or looking at your predicted customer lifetime value. Should we actually discount you to get you as a customer now if you're actually going to be negative in your customer lifetime value for us? That's also what's going to drive your kind of algorithmic experiences. And last but not least at all, given the cost-cutting pressures that most big companies are facing, and that's kind of the efficiency. So with kind of a more algorithmically driven targeting, more algorithmically driven, for example, cost of acquisition, you can start looking at kind of efficiency increases that are so big that you're really going to be in trouble figuring out what to do with all of that kind of extra money. A really interesting case of Lenovo doing many millions of euros of retargeting online. And when they started actually pulling in all of the click data into their own environment, doing machine learning algorithms on who will actually buy based on what they've done, and then using only that target group to push that out, guess how much of the media budget they actually needed to get the same sales? 3%. So not saying that that's what everybody should aim for, but just the fact that if you start deploying a more analytical and more data-driven way of working, you're going to have incredible efficiency gains. So how do you then what do you need to create these algorithmic experiences? The answer is, in a way, fairly simple. You need algorithms, and you need experiences. And when we look at kind of your, let's say, capability stack, and now we're going to talk mainly about the technical stuff, because I'm assuming all of you know all about omnichannel customer experiences and how they are important. But typically, we see a lot of overinvestment in what you would call your marketing stack or your ad tech stack, and a lot of kind of especially overinvestment of focus and effort compared to the lack of focus and effort in your intelligence layer. And then you would maybe talk to the providers of the engagement layers. Those would be your sales forces of the world. And they have a lot of smart tools, and they have a lot of kind of inbuilt AI, for example, which is fantastic. But those are typically optimizing very local, small elements of the experience. So those might be very helpful for your kind of tactical optimization, for example, but they're not going to tell you which customer you should do what with, in what channel, when, and how much you should actually be willing to invest over a period of 3 years, for instance. And those are really strategic questions. So those are things that you wouldn't even want kind of Google or Adobe or Salesforce to control for you. So it's really about combining the both. So magic happens when you take all of your data, you build smart assets of it, and you activate it out in your kind of digital customer interface, where you need all of those marketing technologies. So kind of in order to future-proof your marketing for this kind of top of the pyramid, making sure that you're being very, very deliberate in what you do in both of these layers is really important. Well, what would you then build in your systems of intelligence? Those algorithms that kind of would fuel those algorithmic experiences, you need very many different kinds. So it's not going to be one master AI who will solve your entire company's strategy for you. It's going to be a big mix of different things. For those of you who heard my colleague Tom talk about the ethical part of this kind of algorithmic world, he divided the algorithms into kind of more general purpose algorithms who are just kind of managing your full day for you. You have the experts who might be kind of providing a service which is very algorithmically driven, like Spotify's Discover Weekly. Then you have a lot of algorithms that are actually selling something to you. But all of us need to buy stuff as well. So typically that makes our lives a lot easier. And then you have kind of the silent workhorses that might be somewhere in the background. And those would, for example, be those small algorithms making sure that maybe the timing of an email is correct to each and every respondent. Or maybe a small algorithm that optimizes between 3 different pictures to make it more relevant for you. When we did kind of a small experiment internally and asked, which algorithms do you appreciate in your daily life? Quite a lot of people actually answered Zalando. So I think we're being way too careful in kind of discovering possibilities in algorithmically supporting our sales. And what then, of course, becomes very important is, what are you optimizing your algorithms for? Should you be driving sales this quarter, or should you be driving long-term customer value? Another aspect is, of course, how visible is your algorithm? And I'm shortly going to talk about why it's very important that Google tells me you're 70% likely to like this. It gives me a feeling of, they're actually doing something with all of that data I've been pouring in for years. And then there's kind of the question of discoverability. So an algorithm that is always correct is going to feel boring after a while. So if you're in the kind of trying to create algorithms that provide value or that are trying to sell something, we can't make it too good because that's not going to kind of bring any value for the customer. So those are just a few examples. How many of you who work for the big organizations can say that your customers will say, I really like the algorithm that my insurance company is providing for me? Or I really like how my telco is using my data, all that data I've had with them for 10 years, to give it back to me. I'm guessing very, very few, because never ever do we get, except for Spotify, of course, that's a good example, the answer back with kind of big brand logos really utilizing our data. We're, of course, trying to make that story a bit different. But as then kind of data becomes your most important asset, and I would actually argue data is more important than attention, because data is going to help you also figure out how to get that attention. The question of trust arises. And kind of if you only take one thing away from this talk, I would like you to think about how your customers feel about giving away their data to you. We live in a kind of post-GDPR era, where actually customers are more than ever kind of aware of that they have given consent for you to do stuff with their data. And when they do so, they kind of trust you to do something smart with it, because otherwise it makes no sense. There's a kind of global trust barometer called Edelman, which kind of measures how much we trust in governments or in media or in corporations. And in Sweden, actually, kind of we're in the bottom half of the world in terms of how much consumers trust us. We did a kind of local research where we asked, are you trusting that this company, for kind of the top 100 brands in Finland actually, are you trusting that this brand is using your data for something valuable? And actually, Zalando and some of the international gambling companies get higher scores than any of the local Finnish brands. I haven't done this in Sweden, but I'm fairly sure the same is true, because you never give anything back. And at the moment, kind of Swedes trust companies with kind of 47%, 2018, which is a fairly okay number. But what happens when one of you have a data breach? Will that trust go up or go down? And what happens if, for example, 60% of your customer base don't want to give away their data to you? What happens with that 5 to 8 times ROI potential, for example? It's a really, really pressing question. Do your customers trust you with their data, and do they feel that you're doing something valuable with it? Because the moment they can decide to withdraw it, they will, if they don't feel that there's something good happening. So back to the question, kind of in your companies, are you preparing for reaching the hygiene level of, my brand will look the same, whatever the channel is? Or are you preparing for not being a part of those 52% 15 years from now? I'm going to leave you with something I'm not going to go through, but this is for those of you taking pictures. You can also download my material later. If you want to go back to your organization and kind of, test a little bit, is our plan, our roadmap, our vision, is it future-proofed? Take these questions, ask someone to actually answer them for you, and lay out kind of how that will work, and then you'll know. I'm going to leave you with one final thought, and that is, it's really not about whether you have the technical capabilities. Those are really key, but you can invest a lot of money in, making sure you tick all of the boxes. Unfortunately, we quite often then see that once you've put all of the effort into your marketing transformation program and you've invested millions in implementing all kinds of nice tech and algorithms, you kind of get stuck with this Ferrari in the garage problem. And that's really not how you should do it. And if you want to know how kind of not to arrive there, we have another talk later this afternoon. So you can come and hear there, or you can also download those materials. So with this, I leave you today and wish you a great continued day at Sime. And if you want to download materials, you'll find a QR code here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.